settled by the sea. I know your hand is always there to guide me. You are there. You are there. You are there. You are there. Where can I go? Where can I go from your presence? Trouble is in my way. You're already there. You will not go. You will not go from my presence. For a word of mine is said. If in the depths I lay my head, in the shadow of your wings you're there to hide me. You are there. 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 I've got my faith in the Lord, and it's working in me. I've got my faith in the Lord, and it's showing in me. I've got my faith in the Lord, and it's plain to see. I've got my faith in the Lord. I'm so glad I've got my faith in the Lord. I've got the love of the Lord. I've got the love of the Lord, and it's working in me. I've got the love of the Lord, and it's showing in me. I've got the love of the Lord, and it's plain to see. I've got the love of the Lord. I'm so glad I've got the love of the Lord. I've got the joy of the Lord. I've got the joy of the Lord, and it's working in me. I've got the joy of the Lord, and it's showing in me. I've got the joy of the Lord, and it's plain to see. I've got the joy of the Lord. I'm so glad I've got the joy of the Lord. I've got the joy of the Lord. I've got the joy of the Lord, and it's working in me. I've got the joy of the Lord, and it's showing in me. I've got the joy of the Lord, and it's plain to see. I've got the joy of the Lord. I'm so glad I've got the joy of the Lord. I've got my faith in the Lord. I've got my faith in the Lord, and it's working in me. I've got my faith in the Lord, and it's showing in me. I've got my faith in the Lord, and it's plain to see. I've got my faith in the Lord. I'm so glad I've got my faith in the Lord. I've got the love of the Lord. I've got the love of the Lord, and it's working in me. I've got the love of the Lord, and it's showing in me. I've got the love of the Lord, and it's plain to see. I've got the love of the Lord. I'm so glad I've got the love of the Lord. I've got the joy of the Lord. I've got the joy of the Lord, and it's working in me. I've got the joy of the Lord, and it's showing in me. I've got the joy of the Lord, and it's plain to see. I've got the joy of the Lord. I'm so glad I've got the joy of the Lord. 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 I've got the joy of the joy of the Lord. I've got the joy of the Lord.
His eyes on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. His eyes on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. For his eyes on the sparrow, and I know trouble. His tender word I hear, and resting on His goodness, I lose my doubts and fears. Though by the path He leadeth, but one step I may see. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me.
Hello, welcome to our Bible study. My name is Clint McElroy, and today we'll be in 2 Samuel chapter 4. We will be meeting today at 10 a.m. for services, so join us if you can. Masks will be available at the door for anyone who needs one. Please don't come to the auditorium if you're sick in any way, but instead stay home and enjoy the streaming service. We'll also be meeting at 9 a.m. for classes, so please join us for those if you'd care to. You're also welcome to join us at 9 a.m. to watch this class on the large screen in the auditorium. We have these English Standard Version Bibles from the World Bible School available for anyone who'd care to have one. If you'd like one, please contact our church office and we'll make arrangements to get you one. Our sick list is quite long, so please refer to our bulletin for more information. Please remember Paula and her concerns, and April and her upcoming surgery, and please keep in your prayers Chuck Brazil, Scott's brother, and Charles, his son, who had some blood clots last week. We wish him well and hope he recovers soon. Keep him in your prayers. As is our custom, we want to remember some stories that help keep our minds centered on the Lord. The story of the two men on the road to Emmaus after the crucifixion. These two men were on their way and they were joined by a third man. That third man turned out to be Jesus, but along the way, while he was with them, they recognized that there had been a burning in their heart. It's that burning that they had in their heart that we hope to kindle in our own hearts as we draw closer to the Lord through a study of His Word. We come to the Lord's Word to find out what righteousness is. We're called to be holy, for the Lord our God is holy in Leviticus chapter 19, and that is what we seek to do through a study of His Word. We also want to remember the admonitions of the stories of Rehoboam, Jeroboam, and the prophet that came to Jeroboam, about wise guidance, wise consultation, where we go to find those who can advise us in the ways of the Lord, about following the word of the Lord precisely, doing what the Lord wants us to do according to His promise, as we find in the story of Jeroboam, and then following precisely the instructions we receive from the Lord. We learn from the story of the prophet that came to Jeroboam that he failed in a very minor, what we would consider a very minor point, and stopping on his way home to join another prophet for a meal. And that cost him his life. We want to be wary of following our own direction. We want to follow the Lord's will for us. In doing so, we can trust that the Lord will provide for our salvation. You know, a very strange thing happened to me recently. I was making some pancakes for my parents, and the instructions said to take 2 cups of the powder that was in the mix, 1.5 cups of milk, and 2 eggs, and mix them together to make the batter. I went precisely to do those very things, and I put the powder into the bowl. I went and got 1.5 cups of water and put it in the bowl, and I got 2 eggs and put it in the bowl. I made the pancakes, we ate them, we enjoyed them. Later, as I reflected on the process that morning, I realized that I'd put water in the bowl instead of milk. We need to take care that we do things according to the instruction of the Lord precisely. When He has told us to do something very particular, we should follow that very particular thing, and realize that we can make a mistake and never realize that we've done so, because we have done according to our own will or our own thought, instead of following and trusting and leaning on the Lord for direction. I hope you'll join me now as we go into this study of 2 Samuel chapter 4, and that you'll be edified and encouraged by what we find there. 2 Samuel chapter 4 from the English Standard Version. When Ishbosheth, Saul's son, heard that Abner had died at Hebron, his courage failed, and all Israel was dismayed. Now Saul's son had 2 men who were captains of raiding bands. The name of one was Benaiah, and the name of the other Rechab, sons of Rimmon, a man of Benjamin, from Beeroth, for Beeroth also is counted part of Benjamin. The Beerothites fled to Gideon and have been sojourners there to this day. Verse 4. Jonathan, the son of Saul, had a son who was crippled in his feet. He was 5 years old when the news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel, and his nurse took him up and fled. And as she fled in her haste, he fell and became lame, and his name was Mephibosheth. Verse 5. Now the sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, Rechab and Baanah, set out, and about the heat of the day they came to the house of Ishbosheth as he was taking his noonday rest. And they came into the midst of the house as if to get wheat, and they stabbed him in the stomach. Then Rechab and Baanah his brother escaped. When they came into the house, as he lay on his bed in his bedroom, they struck him and put him to death, and beheaded him. They took his head and went by the way of Arabah all night, and brought the head of Ishbosheth to David at Hebron. And they said to the king, Here is the head of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, your enemy, who sought your life. The Lord has avenged my lord the king this day on Saul and on his offspring. Verse 9. But David answered Rechab and Baanah his brother, the sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, As the Lord lives, who has redeemed my life out of every adversity, when one told me, Behold, Saul is dead, and thought he was bringing good news, I seized him and killed him at Ziklag, which was the reward I gave him for his news. How much more, when wicked men have killed a righteous man in his own house on his bed, shall I now require his blood at your hand and destroy you from the earth? And David commanded his young men, and they killed them and cut off their hands and feet and hanged them beside the pool at Hebron. But they took the head of Ishbosheth and buried it in the tomb of Abner at Hebron. Okay, so last time we studied out of chapter 3 that there had been a war starting in verse 6 between the house of Saul and the house of David. And this war was also mentioned in verse 1, that it was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David, and in it David grew stronger and stronger while the house of Saul became weaker and weaker. But it said here in chapter 3, verse 6 and following, in verse 7, that Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah. And Ishbosheth said to Abner, Ishbosheth being Saul's son, who was the king that Abner set over Israel after Saul had passed away, Why have you gone in to my father's concubine? Then Abner was very angry over the words that Ishbosheth said, and said, Am I a dog's head of Judah? To this day I keep showing steadfast love to the house of Saul your father, to his brothers, to his friends, and have not given you into the hand of David. And yet you charge me today with a fault concerning a woman. So he considered this whole charge to be well beneath his dignity, was not going to tolerate this kind of questioning any further from Ishbosheth. And it doesn't speak to any detail whether or not the allegation was true. But Ishbosheth had brought this allegation against Abner, and Abner was offended. So he says in verse 9, God do so to Abner and more also, if I do not accomplish for David what the Lord has sworn to him, to transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul and set up the throne of David over Israel and over Judah from Dan to Beersheba. And Ishbosheth could not answer Abner another word because he feared him. So Ishbosheth lived in fear of Abner. Abner had, in taking Ishbosheth and setting him up over Israel, set up a puppet kingdom. In effect, he was the king, but he lived and called Ishbosheth king. So Abner sent messengers over to David in verse 12, saying, To whom does the land belong? Make your covenant with me, and behold, my hand shall be with you to bring over all Israel to you. David responded, Good, I will make a covenant with you, but one thing I require of you, that is, you shall not see my face unless you first bring Michal, Saul's daughter, when you have come to see my face. Then David sends messengers to Ishbosheth directly, Saul's son, saying, Give me my wife Michal, for whom I paid the bridal price of 100 foreskins of the Philistines. And if you'll recall, we again referenced the story from earlier studies where Saul had sent David on this fool's errand to retrieve these trophies from Philistines that he would have to kill, believing that if David went to do this, he would certainly die and be out of his hair. He wouldn't have to concern himself with David any longer. But David returned with exactly the thing that was required, and Michal was given to him as promised. And then subsequently, they were not able to be together, and the animosity that Saul had toward David kept them apart, and Saul ended up giving Michal to someone else. And we read now in verse 15 that Ishbosheth sent and took her, Michal, from her husband Paltiel the son of Laish. But her husband went after her, weeping after her, all the way to Bahurim. Then Abner said to him, "Go, return." And he returned. So Abner put a stop to this Paltiel following Michal back to David. Abner conferred with the elders of Israel in verse 17, saying, "For some time past you've been seeking David as king over you." So apparently the elders of Israel didn't like the setup that Abner had forced upon them and putting Ishbosheth over them as king, and that he had been seeking in various ways to make David king. So it makes for an interesting reading between the lines as to the nature of this war between David and Judah, the house of Judah, and Abner, essentially, and Israel. Gives you kind of a clear indication of potentially what was going on there and what was causing David to become stronger and stronger by the hand of the Lord, while Israel became weaker and weaker under the direction of Ishbosheth and Abner. Abner continues, "By the hand of my servant David I shall save my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines," saying that this is what God had promised David, "and from the hands of all their enemies," in verse 18 there. Abner continues by going on to the people of Benjamin and talking to them as well. Then he goes to tell David at Hebron what all of the house of Israel and Benjamin thought good to do in verse 19. In verse 20 it says that Abner came with 20 men to David at Hebron, and David made a feast for Abner and the men who were with him. And Abner said to David, "I will arise now and go gather all Israel to my lord the king, and they will make a covenant with you, that you may reign over all that your heart desires." So David sent Abner away, and he went in peace. At the end of verse 21. Just as he was leaving, or just after he left, in verse 22, the servants of David arrived with Joab from a raid, bringing much spoil with them. But Abner was not with David at Hebron at this point, for he had sent him away, and he had gone in peace. It went to the trouble of repeating in verse 22. When Joab and all the army that was with him came, it was told to Joab, "Abner the son of Ner came to the king, and he has let him go, and he's gone in peace." Then Joab went to the king and said, "What have you done? Behold, Abner came to you. Why is it that you have sent him away so that he is gone? You know that Abner the son of Ner came to deceive you, and to know you're going out and you're coming in, and to know all that you are doing." So this was the rationale that Joab hoped to basically sell to David, and I don't give Joab any honorable intention here. Joab was trying to chastise David because Joab had intended to kill Abner the next time he saw him or had opportunity, and this would have been a good time, but Abner had been sent on his way in peace by the king. But Joab says that in fact Abner had come with these ill intentions just to spy out the nature of David's comings and goings so that he might use them against David. Then Joab leaves the presence of David and sends messengers after Abner, and they bring Abner back from the cistern of Sirah. David didn't know that Joab had done this. When Abner returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside in the midst of the gate to speak with him privately, as if to speak to him privately. And there he struck him in the stomach, and he died, for the blood of Azael his brother. Afterward, when David heard of it, he said, "I and my kingdom are forever guiltless before the Lord for the blood of Abner the son of Ner. May it fall upon the head of Joab and upon all his father's house, and may the house of Joab never be without one who has a discharge, or is leprous, or who holds a spindle, or who falls by the sword, or who lacks bread." And I had someone enlighten me as to the nature of holding a spindle. Apparently that is a way of saying that someone would be a slave. So he was wishing that these would be slaves to someone for the rest of their existence. Continues in verse 30, Joab and Abishai, his brother, killed Abner because he had put their brother Azael to death in the battle at Gibeon, which was an honorable death in my view. Azael had followed and pursued according to the terms of the battle. As a result, Abner killed him. So in verse 31, David said to Joab and to all the people who were with him, "Tear your clothes and put on sackcloth and mourn before Abner." And King David followed the bier, and they buried Abner at Hebron. And the king lifted up his voice and wept at the grave of Abner, and all the people wept. And the king lamented for Abner, saying, Should Abner die as a fool dies? Your hands were not bound, your feet were not fettered. As one falls before the wicked, you have fallen. And to me, that means he was caught off guard, as if he was the subject of a base crime, instead of someone who should have died an honorable death in battle or in service to his kingdom. And all the people wept again over him. Then all the people came to persuade David to eat bread while it was yet day. But David swore, saying, God, do so to me, and more also, if I taste bread or anything else till the sun goes down. And all the people took notice of it, and it pleased them, as everything that the king did pleased all the people. So all the people and all Israel understood that day that it had not been the king's will to put to death Abner the son of Ner. And the king said to his servants, Do you not know that a prince and a great man has fallen this day in Israel? And I was gentle today, though anointed king. These men, the sons of Zeruiah, are more severe than I. The Lord repay the evildoer according to his wickedness. So David wanted no responsibility for this. The people seemed to take that from his behavior and understand that David bore, in fact, no responsibility for Abner's death, that this was on Joab and Abishai, the sons of Zeruiah. David apparently loved Abner even as much as he had loved Saul and Jonathan, recognizing that he was a great man, a prince who had fallen that day in Israel. Of note here also is this concept of not eating bread or tasting anything till the sun goes down. Again, the falling of the sun, the setting of the sun was the end of the day and the start of a new day. So this was the way they observed time. And it is of note that even Israel at this point still recognized time this way, as it did throughout the whole of the Bible. And we should remember that as readers today. The way they count time is different, significantly different than the way we count time. Going on in today's reading, when Ishbosheth, Saul's son, heard that Abner had died at Hebron, his courage failed, and all Israel was dismayed. So those who had trusted in Abner's strength to keep Israel now recognized that Abner was not there to keep Israel. Now Saul's son, Ishbosheth, had two men who were captains of raiding bands. The name of one was Benai, and that's the way I'm pronouncing it again. I don't know how it's pronounced. Baanai. The name of the other was Rechab, the sons of Rimmon, a man of Benjamin from Beeroth. And it says that Beeroth was counted part of Benjamin because the Beerothites fled to Gideon and have been sojourners there to this day. The significance of that is lost on me. The stories of the Benjaminites are many and not that great. So if you go back and read previous books, you know that they had fallen into disrepute and that it was an unusual thing to find them in this honorable position of being the family of the king of Israel. But now we see that this had come to naught, and this was the end of that ruling families. So here it says Jonathan, it interjects this little passage. Jonathan had a son who was crippled in his feet, and it tells the story of Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth was 5 years old when the news of Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel, their deaths, and his nurse took him up and fled. And she fled in haste, and he fell as a result and became lame. And it interjects that here, and I don't know exactly why, because his story is separate and apart from this. But we'll read more about Mephibosheth later. Now the sons of Rimmon, the Beerothite, Rechab and Baanai, set out, and about the heat of the day they came to the house of Ishbosheth, as Ishbosheth was resting. And they came into the midst of the house, in verse 6, as if to get wheat, and they stabbed him in the stomach. Then Rechab and Benai, his brother, escaped. Now, this is where there's a little discontinuity in the English Standard Version. It says in the footnote that there's an additional part that is not included in the main passage, that it is in some other translations or source materials. But it says in the Septuagint, it says, And behold, the doorkeeper of the house had been cleaning wheat, but she grew drowsy and slept. So Rehab and Bani, his brothers, slipped in. So they were able to slip in because the person who was tending to the wheat had fallen asleep. And they came into the house and found Ishbosheth sleeping on his bed in his bedroom, and they struck him and killed him in his sleep and beheaded him. And then they took his head and went by way of the Arabah all night back to David at Hebron. There they brought the head of Ishbosheth to the king, saying, "Here is the head of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, your enemy, who sought your life. The Lord has avenged my lord the king this day on Saul and on his offspring." Now this is again looking at the way enemies would behave in the world, not the way David treated his enemies. So again, reading between the lines, it would have been very interesting to see the nature of this war between David's Judah, David in the house of Judah, and Ishbosheth's Israel. So what exactly was the nature of this war? To me, it suggests strongly that David's war was a war of defense, and Abner's war against Judah was one of offense, where they would expend great resources trying to take ground and not have any real success. But David answered Rechab and Bani his brother in verse 9, "As the Lord lives, who has redeemed my life out of every adversity, when one told me, 'Behold, Saul is dead,' and thought he was bringing good news, I seized him and killed him at Ziklag, which was the reward I gave him for his news. How much more, when wicked men have killed a righteous man in his own house on his bed, shall I now require his blood at your hand and destroy you from the earth?" David did not hold back against those who rose up against their leaders. This was not acceptable to David. David considered Ishbosheth a legitimate ruler over Israel, and it was wrong for them to rise up against him, just as it was wrong for someone to take it upon themselves to help Saul kill himself in battle. David did not look kindly at this at all. And then he commands his young men in verse 12, "And they killed these men and cut off their hands and feet and hanged them beside the pool at Hebron, where they could be seen by all of the people of Hebron. They took the head of Ishbosheth and buried it in the tomb of Abner at Hebron." It is a terrible thing to encourage separation, division among a people who should be united. It's a terrible thing to rise up against your leaders. It's a terrible thing to take it upon yourself to do those things that the Lord should take care of. We should leave these things in the hands of the Lord, trust in the Lord that He will take care of those that need to be taken care of according to His will. And He does, and He always manages to do so. And woe to those who take it upon themselves to be that measure of action against those who serve the Lord in this manner. It's a terrible, terrible thing. Terrible to see this. Terrible to see men presume this would be acceptable to David or anyone else, that it would be acceptable to kill a man in his sleep and try to take some kind of credit for bringing a trophy to David in this way. Terrible, terrible thing. Hope you found a word of encouragement in today's lesson. We will be meeting today at 10 a.m., so please join us if you can. If you're sick in any way, don't come to the auditorium, but instead stay home and enjoy the streaming service. I am going to post another meditations over Psalm 19, as suggested from Scott's sermon last week. And I think I'll be doing this continuously with some other passages that have come to my mind. The Word of the Lord speaks on its own. I don't need to really add a lot of commentary every time to everything. So I will just be posting some meditations as I have opportunity. Looking forward to doing that. I hope you enjoy those as we have opportunity to do these things. God bless and have a great week.
The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. portion, says my soul. Therefore I will hope in him. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will hope in him. Therefore I will hope in him.
My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit in God. My soul magnifies the Father. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. My soul magnifies the Spirit. My spirit rejoices in God. My soul magnifies the Father. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God.
I will call upon the Lord.
I will call upon the Lord.
Who is worthy to be
Who
praised?
is worthy to be
So
praised?
shall I be saved from my
Shall I be
enemies.
saved from my enemies?
The Lord liveth, and blessed be the rock, and let the God of my salvation be exalted. The Lord liveth, and blessed be the rock, and let the God of my salvation be exalted. Jesus Christ, he died for me.
Jesus Christ, he died for me.
And he took away my
And he
sin.
took away my sin.
I will live with him for eternity.
I know the Lord liveth,
And blessed be the rock, and let the God of my salvation be exalted.
I know the Lord liveth,
And blessed be the rock, and let the God of my salvation be exalted.
I know the Lord liveth,
And blessed be the rock, and let the God of my salvation be exalted. The Lord liveth, and blessed be the rock, and let the God of my salvation be exalted.